This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Alongside Pierre and Noujaim. I thought I was wired up, Pierre. Honestly, I thought I was wired up.
That got me pretty good. that got me pretty good.
That was embarrassing. Listen, it's my first day. We're using microphones. Sometimes you forget things.
If I had a nickel for every time I forgot to turn my microphone on when I've walked into the TV studio, though, I'm not above something like that. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize, so you're wired, when you get wired up at 6 o'clock, what time do you usually throw your microphone on?
Oh, let's see. I would say for, let's say here I'm on, if I'm doing a 6 o'clock show, it'd be about 6:13, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so I would be mic'd up at probably 6:09.
6:09. Yeah. And you can turn that around fast.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you can turn around fast. Now, there is scenarios involved, though, that hey, I've got to do all these things. Let me put my mic on now at 5:50.
Yes.
And then between 5:50 and 6:13, you might have to visit the facility. You're not going to turn it, you've got to train yourself not to. Otherwise, Everybody in the booth is going to hear Pierre in the bathroom.
Right.
Even if you just have to go wash your hands, they're just going to hear you da-da-da-da. So, yeah, it's a skill. It's a learned skill. When Dan, you remember Dan Ingham?
Yes.
Dan was at Channel 10 for a while, and now he's at one of our clients, First National Bank in Central Texas. But Dan had me on his morning show one time, and they came in and mic'd me up. It was very early in the morning, and so it was 6:30. And, your body has a clock, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they came in and tested me out. And, okay, you check. Okay, we can hear you in the booth. And then I said, hey, where's the bathroom? I got to, it just kind of, it was 6:30. Normally at that time I was asleep, and then it was okay, well, hey, I've got better, go use the bathroom before. And I was walking down the hall, and thank God they had put that, it was just in my pocket.
Yeah.
Because right when I turned the corner to go in the bathroom, I saw that the green light was on. And I was like, oh man, because they were about to hear Tom Hanks in League of Their Own.
That's an all-time movie, by the way.
Yeah,
what a great
absolutely,
reference.
Absolutely. But that was what it would have been, because I was I'd gotten up, I had a Gatorade to get I don't drink coffee, so I need something to give me energy, and I just chugged it on the way in, so then it was 10 minutes after being there, I was like,
it's about that time.
I did not want it, but there was a good chance that forever I would have been a story at the KWTX Christmas party.
There's got to be, I'm sure there's got to be YouTube clips out there of things like that happening to news anchors or reporters or something where they're still mic'd up, and it's got to be out there somewhere. One of my great fears is to be on YouTube.
What do you know what Tucker Carlson's not at Fox anymore? It's because he was.
Yeah, right.
He was walking around the hall, throwing out epithets and things about ladies, and they're hey, what's your deal, man? What are you talking about? Well, we heard it all.
It's you just for all you future news and sportscasters out there. Just pay attention to your surroundings and just pay attention. Yeah,
absolutely. So Pierre, you were in Mexico last week.
I was.
How was Mexico?
It was absolutely fantastic. And then the bill came a couple of days ago, and then I was like, did we really have that much fun? We couldn't have had that much fun, could we? But but it was great. And now I left the beach last week, and Paul, it has been snowing here for 2 straight days in Minnesota. I'm looking outside my window right now. We had at least 8 inches over the last couple of days, at least. So. Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun turnaround. But Mexico was great. Yeah,
I'm sure it was. But you get those bills. Actually, this morning I was on the phone. My uncle is a travel agent and was talking about our trip for the summer, and we went to Hawaii last year. And when my wife brings up vacations, I was like, you know where's fun? Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah. Yes. Correct. And like on the way out too, because we went to Tulum, for those of you watching, which is south of Cancun. You fly into Cancun, you got Cancun, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum, like all in succession when you go further south down the coast there. And I've done that a couple of times now. This is my third time down in that area, and I say to my girlfriend, I said, I think this is going to be the last time for a while, at least, that we go down here, because it's American prices. You're thinking like, pesos to the dollar and all blah, blah. No, not that case at all. They know who their clientele is. And I'm just like, we could do something as good for a lot cheaper somewhere else around the world. 100%.
You're going to say, where is really underrated? I saw some great video this weekend of Spokane, Washington.
Oh, lovely. Lovely this time
Rivers,
of year.
good. Like, we can go fly fishing. You love fly fishing, honey, right? You'll love fly fishing. Once you get out there and catch a fish, you'll love it. You'll love it.
That's it. You catch the fish, you get the dinner free. It's a 2-for-1.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, come on. How do you beat that? Shout out to Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the things. That's what happens. And then you get the look of like, okay, well, I guess I gotta find a place that's an actual vacation hub.
Yeah, I was like, so when I saw the bill of all the accumulated things, I was like, wow, we did this. And we did that. It's the old Seinfeld routine at dinner. One of my favorite opening monologue when everybody's hungry. It's like more wine, more drinks, more this, more that. It'll be the greatest meal of our lives. And then the bill comes. It's like, this can't be right. Does this look right to you?
Yeah.
We're not hungry now. Why are we paying for all this food? Like it's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Pierre, my bracket is absolutely shredded.
Yes.
It is pointless to even care about it now. I am now just going to enjoy the Sweet 16. I'm just going to say it right here. Am a big, dumb idiot, and I picked Auburn to win the whole thing. And Yale said, listen, you could never get in here, and we don't respect you enough. So we're going to use that as fuel to the fire to beat Auburn, who you might have spent too much time watching the SEC tournament a week ago and thinking like, man, this team's really good, and forgotten that we know math.
Right.
I don't know, whatever. Or forgotten that you sat in Providence, Rhode Island and watched us do this to Baylor one time.
Mm-hmm.
Just 10 short years ago, and have you forgotten? How have you forgotten?
Yeah, I remember that game. I wasn't there for that game.
No,
that was the year after I left. But
Nick was.
But I remember watching that game on TV. I remember watching that for sure.
Nick and I went out to dinner one night in Providence in a place that was mobbed up for sure. Like the kind, like like The Departed, like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That.
Did you get a cranberry juice?
Like that with like these guys of Providence. You're like, that place was I'll tell you, great restaurant.
Okay, good.
But definitely it was one of those places like, hey, Mikey's in the back. Go say hello. Go say hello to Mikey.
Catalina's your last name? Oh, well, I got a cousin.
Go say hello like this. Who's the owner? It looks like Mikey's in charge. He's not really the owner, but he has a large financial stake.
I was gonna say to you, it sounds like you made the classic mistake like 90% of the population does of like, I'm gonna start watching time. And be like, this team looks good, and that team, that people fall into that trap all the time. But at the same time, I know you're not just starting watching college basketball, and that's why it's like, is that like a mythical argument now of people who are like, somebody's getting hot at conference tourney time, that must be the team. There's no rhyme or reason to this. I do 2-3 brackets every single year. This year has been the worst maybe that I've ever done in my entire life. However, I will say I did 2 brackets this year instead of 3. I typically do 2 or 3 every year, but I still have 3 Final Four teams alive in both of my brackets. However, the pool is so deep and I did so poorly in the first 2 rounds that I don't know if I have enough ground, enough runway left to kind of make up ground here the rest of the way, even though I still have 3 or 4 teams in both my brackets left.
I need everyone else to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Like also have picked, but like, there's people who have picked North Carolina and Houston and UConn and all that. So my initial pick was Houston. And I thought, I've got too much Big 12 bias. I've seen Houston play a couple times this year in person. Maybe I'm just too impressed.
Yeah.
Like when you meet a girl and you tell your friends, like, man, this girl's so hot. Like she's like Kathy Ireland, 1993 hot. And then you're like, their friends meet her like, well, she's good looking, but like, Kathy Ireland, 1993 hot. I don't know. Like I'm not putting a poster of this girl on my wall.
That's exactly what happened with me with South Carolina. South Carolina to me was like, what were they? Top 15, borderline top 10 team, late in the season, looking pretty good. And I'm watching South Carolina play. I was like, you know what? This team, I think, has a little bit of, enough. They've got enough to maybe surprise some people. And what happened? They get rolled by Oregon in the first round. Yeah.
So here's the other thing that happened. So Oakland beats Kentucky on Thursday night. On Friday, Pierre, I'll have to send you the link. We had Greg Campy on the show, the head coach at Oakland. He is the funniest guest we might have ever had, ever. He was great. He was unbelievable. And he said, if we win, I'll come back on again. Then they go out and fought as hard as they could, absolutely as hard as they could, and lost to NC State. And I was so mad at NC State for the only reason of, well, now my Monday show's ruined. Like, that's all I thought. I was like, that's it. It's ruined. But I do think we'd be able to get him back on again for sure. But just talking about life would be great with Greg Campy. He was so funny. But that's why, I do think, that when you hear about Greg Sankey and Brett Yormark, I don't want to leave him out of this, but it's kind of Sankey leading the charge here, expanding this tournament and bringing in more teams from the power leagues. I'm completely against it. Yeah. 100% against it. And nothing that happened this weekend indicates that would make this better, because we talked about how our brackets are shredded. Brackets being shredded is what makes this week great. The fact that on day one, I can be so sure of myself, 100% sure that, man, you better watch out for Auburn. They're badass. Like, they will tear you up. They play defense. They shoot threes. They've got Johnny Broom. They've got all these other guys. They're a little bit underseeded. Like, they're going to sneak up on some people. And then they didn't even sneak up on Yale. Like, dude, it's over. And we're talking about an Ivy League team that, is playing on Saturday again, or Sunday. I guess they played Sunday. Oakland's a great story. And look, A&M, had to make it in the tournament, and NC State, A&M and NC State had to make it in the tournament by doing what they did in their conference tournaments to lock up their spot. And both of them, look, A&M took Houston to overtime last night, made a great buzzer beater.
Great game.
Yeah,
great game.
Great, fantastic game. NC State drilled Tech, really drilled Texas Tech, and then had all they wanted against Oakland, mighty, mighty Oakland. Who's the city of Louisville's favorite team all of a sudden. And you see like that Marquette, Colorado game was really good. All these great games that were awesome. Let's not mess with that by going, well, I really hope that that Missouri gets in this barely above 500 for the year and under 500 in their league. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. If Oklahoma was in this thing, it wouldn't be as good.
Nope. No, and it never ceases. Listen, we've had this conversation. I think that we've had this conversation about the NCAA tournament for about a decade now. People remember it used to be 64, and then they're like, well, we'll make it 68. We'll do a couple playing games, and I hated that as well. But at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. I get it, but it never ceases to amaze me how people want to take a perfect product and find a way to ruin it. And in that turn, I'm asking myself, well, why would you want to ruin it? Or why would you want to tweak it? Or why would you want to do it? And I feel like I sound like a broken record. I always keep coming back to the same old answer of, Well, you know, sports gambling is legal in a lot of states now. And if you had double the amount of games that you could gamble on, well, that would be pretty good for a lot of people, wouldn't it? And it just, I'm not saying that's the sole reason why, but
the reason it all goes back to the same thing, they serve one God. It's money.
Yes.
It's money.
Correct.
That's who they serve. They serve money. And the only way that they can think up to make more money on it is to make it bigger, as opposed to maybe find a way to highlight the value you've already created, right? That's what I would like to see. Like, you've already got value you've created. This is a great thing. When you get to your next deal, you're going to be like, the ratings for CBS and TNT were as high as they've ever been this week. You know what that means? When the deal comes up again, you can charge more. That's how you make more money. And then the other thing I continue to ask about is, how much money do you need, guys? Like, how much money do you need? Because I know that we've got a lot of mouths to feed here in college athletics. There's a lot of mouths that you're going to have to start feeding athlete mouths legitimately for the first time. But even then, even when you take a little bit of that money away, like, are you talking about, going from a private jet to first class? Like, still not a bad thing. Like, like having
and Paul, like I said before, you look at postseason tournaments across all landscape of sports, and I'm going to use this word, and I don't feel like I'm over exaggerating at all. The NCAA tournament, the men's tournament itself, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Not one person in America is disagreeing. Like, I hear saying, like, well, it should be this, or maybe we should expand it, or maybe we should shrink it, or maybe we should tweak it this way or that way. Not a single person has a problem with the way the postseason tournament is going. And for people to come in and try to do this continuous behavior of quantity over quality in so many aspects of not just sport, but in life in general, it feels like a high-powered train, and I'm standing on the tracks, and I'm trying to put my hands up here, and I know I have no chance, but I might as well die in principle at this point, because it's a perfect postseason format. Nothing beats it. Nothing beats it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's great, and just more and more and more at the expense of what we're losing. It's just not enough. And I say this on the show all the time, and I know I sound like a broken record, but when you put the consumer first, everything else works out for you. When you put if you're a business owner, when you put your employee, like, if your employees are happy and the consumers are happy, you're going to be happy. But that's not really what happens. It's the boss has got to be happy first, and then everybody else is. When, we've got this trickle down idea of things. No, things need to, like, trickle up. Like, that way, because then, like, hey, these people are happy. They respond when I need them to do things. Our customers keep coming back because we take care of them. Our employees like servicing the customers because it brings everybody joy. Everybody's making money. Nobody's mad about anything, but that's not how it works. It's like I don't know if you remember the 50s or 60s B-movie sci-fi, The Blob, or you've heard of The Blob.
I've heard of it. I don't know if I ever saw it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, The Blob, and Emery's here. He's 22 years old, so he's probably never heard of it. But The Blob is a large pink alien mass that just lands in this small town in white picket fence America.
Looks exactly how it sounds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a blob. And then the teenagers out, necking in the park, and then they're like, hey, let's go see what this is. And then they, like, touch the blob, and it gets bigger, and it consumes them. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the sheriff and the townspeople are trying to figure out how we stop this thing, and they've got to get the government to come in. Eventually, I'll spoil the end, they freeze it, because that's its weakness. They freeze it, they put it in a container, and they drop it in Antarctica. That's what they do. That's how they stop the blob. So that's what this feels like to me. It's like the blob is just gonna, like, just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're just the townspeople running away. And there's, like, maybe we're like, I'll take the role of, like, the sheriff who's like, I'm not gonna let this happen to my town, but maybe I'm too exaggerating my own importance in that, but that's what you and I are doing here. Like, we're the sheriff going, hey, we can't let this happen in our town.
We are but one man, unfortunately. Yeah. And that's, I just can't keep coming back around to, it's like nobody asked for this. Nobody's asking for this format to be tweaked, because everybody, for year after year after year, everybody fills out a bracket. The casual fan, the people who don't even watch basketball, they fill out a bracket. I don't know of any other sporting event that draws in not just the casual fan, but like not even fans who just might catch a game or might fill out a bracket and think to themselves, oh, you know what, this is kind of fun. And there's no better like selling point for a product than the men's NCAA tournament. And I don't even think that men's college basketball as a whole, for a good decade now, I don't even feel like it's been a great product overall. Like, the games have kind of been touch and go. I can't remember the number of times I've watched the game thinking to myself, how do these guys make D1? They can't hit a mid-range jumper. Yeah. Like, it's well, so
I'll tell you that, Pierre, the last, I would say, 4 years have turned. The reason it's gotten more popular is NIL and the transfer portal have made the tournament games better, because the talent is not just hoarded into a couple places. There's people all over the place. There's good players all over the place. People are seeking out opportunities in different places. There's people who stay longer in college. So you have veteran players that can make a mid-range jumper now and can make free throws, although still seemingly nobody in college basketball can make free throws. But that's how it feels like. But they have those things. You have veteran players and not just a bunch of guys who are trying to get in the NBA. I think what NIL has allowed people to do is understand that, like, the NBA, they have I understand, like, declaring early for the NFL, because if you're picked in any of the first 3 or 4 rounds, you're pretty much guaranteed a roster spot.
Yeah.
I'm only declaring early for the NBA now if you can tell me I'm going to make the NBA and not have to go play in Turkey, even though that's still pretty good money. But, like, I'm going to stay in America as long as I can, because they have 2 rounds of that draft. 2 rounds. And speaking of Turkey and all those other places, those players get picked too. So of those 64 picks or whatever there are in the NBA draft, 60 picks, right? 60? There's 30.
60.
Yeah, 60 picks. Of those 60 picks, at least 12 of them are coming from overseas in those 2 rounds.
And it's only going to get bigger. It's only going to get bigger,
Yeah. And, you know, then I've got to deal with kind of this other little window of people that are, look, I'm never going to be, like these guys who are one and dones that are for sure there. So then you've got, about 10 of those guys every year that are going to get picked before everybody else, no matter if they're going to be, like, they're picked on potential alone. And then you've got to, like, circle in all those other. So we've just taken, like, 22 picks out of this thing. That's most of the way through the first round, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm not gonna run the risk of that, especially now so college basketball is getting better. Like, the reason that when you and I were younger and we liked watching Duke versus UNLV and Michigan and Kentucky was those guys were all there for at least 3 years.
Right.
We got to see Grant Hill and Christian Laettner and Bobby Hurley play together for 3 years. We got to see, the UNLV team with Larry Johnson and those dudes play together for a while. The Fab Five played together for a while. Like, you got to attach it. Now, the transfer portal makes that less likely because kids leave, but at least you have veteran teams now. Guys who are not just like, that's why Kentucky lost, because Kentucky was a bunch of diaper dandies, and Oakland is the guys who are like, well, I'm thinking about the next phase of my life. I'm not really worried about this. This kid's going to be nervous. I'm just going out and grip it and rip it.
It's funny that you bring that up, because in that time, I was, as a big consumer of the NBA, I hated seeing kids. You had the exceptions, of course, but I hated seeing kids at 18, 19 going into the league. And I remember the Shane Battiers of the league, who are, while not a superstar in the NBA, he was definitely a superstar at Duke, but not a superstar in the NBA, but he's a guy. I'd always loved the guys who've been in college for 3 years at least, because their bodies are more physically mature. They can step into the league and they don't have to be superstars, but they could be like great role players like Shane Battier was. And I love those kind of guys who are championship pieces on NBA teams. Those guys that come in and play 15, 16 minutes and give you great perimeter defense, grab rebounds. Those guys are more physically ready to step in the league. We didn't see that over the last decade with all the 18, 19-year-olds coming into the league who just can't shoot. Like Scoot Henderson's a perfect example right now in Portland, having a horrendous rookie year shooting the ball. I know he's been hurt, but, guys who are more physically mature and ready for the beatings of an 82-game season, guys who are 21, 22, there's got to be a correlation there in terms of product of the league, bringing in guys who've been in college for at least 3 years. It has to be.
Yeah, look, you know who's not a Hall of Famer, but pretty damn close is Robert Horry.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. He's got all these rings from 3 different places, from LA, San Antonio, and Houston. And guess what? He wasn't, what other than being Big Shot Bob was, he was an important part of that, but he was never the most important player on his team. If Greg Popovich was like, okay, you could save either Tim Duncan or Robert Horry, he'd be like, listen, Bob, I appreciate all you've done, but I got to save Duncan. I hope you can swim as the boat's sinking, but I'm definitely saving Duncan. And Robert Horry had been like, no, I get it. Let me help you save him. Here you go.
100%. And you have the exceptions. Obviously, there are the exceptions. Your Kobe Bryants of the world. David Robinson, I'm convinced they probably 1 year of college basketball to still be the number 1 overall pick and have the type of career that he had. You're obviously going to have those exceptions, but I feel like when a player is more physically mature to handle the rigors of the league, that just makes the product better. And that's why I was in favor of when there was talk of what's the age limit for the NBA. My hope was I would say they would say you have to be in college at least 2 years. But of course, there's other factors involved in that, and I don't get to make those decisions.
Here's what I think. I think the market determines whether things happen, and there's things that fluctuate. There were there's a run on high school guys for a while. Remember when they were coming out? Yeah. Because everybody thought that, I'm going to get KG or Kobe, and I'll throw Jermaine O'Neal in that. He had a nice long NBA career, but he wasn't those guys. But, I'm going to get KG or Kobe when really, you have to respect what those guys were. Or LeBron, KG, Kobe, LeBron, okay, you're talking about, 3 of the best 5 players in the last 20 years, as opposed to the other guys who came out and were like, well, no, I'm barely able to drive.
And you ended up with more Kwame Browns and Jonathan Benders in the league. Those were more often than not than the potential Hall of Fame talent that you saw in those guys that you mentioned. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. When we come back, let's talk about Sweet 16, where we see potential upsets happening, or if it's just going to go chalk. The 4 number 1s are still alive, despite my best efforts of picking Auburn. Now one less, behemoth to knock them out. This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com. Welcome to the Triple Option. Here's your host, Paul Catalina.
Garrett, would you care to say, I mean, you don't have to say exactly what I said to you, but convey to Pierre and our audience, when you said, this is the best bracket I've ever had, what did I say back to you?
Pretty much go F myself. Something along those lines. Something like that. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Is that the worst thing I've said to you this weekend when you've brought that up?
No, it might not be.
Yeah,
so
we had a text.
We're getting better.
We had a text this weekend that was...
It was a little harsh.
It was very harsh. It was very harsh.
Just hating.
Yeah. Yep. No, it was bad. My best friend who was just here a couple weeks ago, I was in his bracket and I texted him and I was like, man, my bracket is shredded. He goes, I didn't want to say anything. I'm like, yeah. He's like, but here's the thing that happens. Every time I get in if I'm in it with like you guys, like we're all do this every day, right? Yeah. So nobody really can give each other any kind of crap when we're wrong because we're all wrong. It's what we do every day. But when you're the only person who is a sports reporter, podcaster, someone who's done this every day for nearly 2 decades, and you're the only one in, and then someone's like grandson is beating you, but it gets in the chat. Like he goes, you need to go look in the chat. And like, oh, look at Mr. Hotshot YouTube. And I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, I mean,
look who knows so much.
Yeah. You see in every bracket, you got, Jenny Smith from accounting, who maybe has watched one basketball game in the last 2 years, is just smoking you in the bracket. It just... Yeah, it sticks in my craw a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Garrett, I've decided next year we're going to do two different brackets.
Okay.
One of them will be more of a team effort. But the bracket we're going to do is we're going to select the winners based on, in honor of the great Mike Leach, mascot fights.
Oh, I'm all about that.
Yes, so that's how we're going to do it. If the mascots got in a fight, then, for example, I'll use the debate of yesterday, one of the better games was Creighton and Oregon.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. Went in overtime. Creighton wound up separating at the end. 2 overtimes. Yeah, 2 overtimes. Yeah, 2 overtimes. And Creighton separated in that second overtime. The Ducks ran out of gas. But that's the Blue Jays versus the Ducks. So that's bird v. bird. Mm-hmm. Very different birds.
They are.
And my contention, and I use this on the Takes app, by the way. Please sign up for the Takes app. On the Takes app. That's a promotion we're doing right now, by the way.
Nice.
I'll send you the link. It's fun. It's fun. But I said I'm taking a Blue Jay over a duck because a duck, while they can go aquatic, and a Blue Jay really can't, that's maybe more of a retreat in a defense strategy. And that if we're both in the air, the Blue Jay is much more nimble and can get maybe a lot of more pecking in. So that's why I selected the Blue Jay, and I was right. But yeah, so the only thing is I've never seen a flock of Blue Jays. I've just seen like a Blue Jay sitting like on a branch or in a bird bath. I've seen large flocks of ducks. So
flying V.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like these are things that I spent thinking about yesterday.
The hard pressing issues.
Yes.
You know what, though? I got to tell you, like, thinking about it that way in terms of filling out a bracket, who am I to tell you that's idiotic? There is just, I have seen people go on colors, mascots, just like, oh, my grandma lives in that state. I love North Carolina, whatever. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Who am I to tell you have an idiotic strategy? There is no strategy.
Look, for example, I've already picked Iowa State to beat Illinois. In their upcoming matchup. But that is a Cyclone versus a Native American tribe in the Illini, a proud people.
Yeah.
So the way I would think that the only way that the Illini could beat the Storm would be to hide from it. Mm-hmm. You can't just run into a Cyclone.
No.
So I think the Cyclone obviously wins there. Now, can I be wrong? And maybe there's some sort of ritual that gets done that, defeats the Cyclone. I don't know. But those are things that I think about. And this is why I will say to this day, I will never have a better interview than the one I did with Mike Leach that was supposed to be 15 minutes and lasted an hour and a half.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes. So he and I think a lot like him. I think a lot like that. Let's see.
Iowa State, Illinois, by the way, I think that to me is the game of the Sweet 16.
Oh, it might be. They match up very well with each other.
I'm really looking forward to that game. That game's going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's unfortunately for them, unless San Diego State can knock off UConn, which does not look likely. But again, San Diego State was in the Final Four last year, as was UConn and won it. But that's what's kind of cool about this.
Game. Yeah. Rematch of the title game.
Rematch of the title game. I'm sure that San Diego State still has it in their craw about it. I'm not sure that UConn cares about their craw at all. I think they're just a train.
I was worried that before the show today, I was worried that at some point during the show, you were going to ask me who I think has looked the most impressive or who has kind of impressed you the most. And I was going to be, kind of a little womp about it. I was like, well, can I pick UConn? Because they look like, I hate to be Captain Obvious, but they look like an absolute machine right now. They have to be the odds-on favorite to win it the rest of the way. They look that good.
Yeah. No, look, Stetson, I mean, that was one of the most, it was the hardest game to watch, ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on during our show the other day, and Garrett flipped it because it was like 31-4 before you could, I remember looking over to the left here. Now, Pierre, you haven't been in our studio, but I'll tell you, so the main set is over to the right of me.
Right.
I'm looking at you right now on one of our monitors. We have 3 TVs. Okay. We have 2 of them going with games on. And so Garrett goes, oh, UConn's on during the commercial break, flips it on. And then we do a segment. I look over during the commercial break, and it's Garrett's walking over, and it's 31-4 or whatever ridiculous score it was. My wife's texting me. She's like, I feel bad for Stetson. This is just not right. This is terrible. And here's what sucks for Stetson is that Kim Jong-Sankey is back in his lair going, I told you. This is why. They don't need to they don't need to be here with us. Yeah. But then they have Northwestern, a team that beat FAU, a team that was in the Final Four last year. Although FAU, Drake, and Washington State got 1 win, but FAU, Drake, and Washington State all lost their head coaches in the last 24 hours to other jobs. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast now. But with Dusty May in particular, for the last 365 days, everybody's been like, is he going to go to Ohio State? Or is Indiana going to fire Mike Woodson and bring him back home because he's an Indiana guy? Is he going to go, where's he going to go? Who's going to be open? Is he going to go to Louisville? Dusty May to Louisville. Is that going to happen? He went to Michigan, so they lost. But Northwestern, a fine team, and UConn beat them by 17, and that's the hardest UConn's had to work in a week and a half.
Yeah,
and
I know.
When I say that, I'm not saying they didn't work hard, but they were not, at no point was Danny Hurley in that game going, man, I better get the whiteboard out. As a matter of fact, I watched some of it during the timeouts. I don't think anybody got a whiteboard out.
No.
I don't think,
I don't think so.
He didn't say hey, here's what we're going to do here. He was just like, hey, you remember that time we did this? Go try that and let's see what happens. They're whiteboardless right now. They are saving so much money on dry erase markers.
Well, thank goodness for that. Is that another thing that's good for the environment now that maybe that I don't know about? Perhaps.
Yeah, we can listen.
That's good.
There's less.
Great.
It's plastic. Plastic's not necessarily good.
No. That's good. No, I like the rest of the way. I'm looking at the bracket. I know you don't want chalk and stuff like that. You got to talk about Gonzaga and Purdue, right? The way Gonzaga just blew the doors off Kansas, and then Purdue with their recent choke job history, but in their first 2 games have looked absolutely fantastic.
Well, Zach Edey's on a mission.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He didn't like that people made fun of him for a year.
No. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I know. He shaved his sideburns off, and he's not messing around anymore.
Yeah. The people who tune in to watch Purdue as well, to watch Zach Edey. Trey Coffin ran it. The other day when they're playing Utah State yesterday, I was like, boy, this kid's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's really, I know he gets overshadowed by Zach Edey, but I was like, Trey Coffin's really freaking good. So Purdue, I do have UConn and Purdue meeting up in one bracket. I do.
Yeah. By the way, would you like to hear someone let out an eek of imminent sorrow?
Yes, please.
Okay. Emory, did you know that Zach Edey's second choice to go to school was Baylor?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Jerome Tang and John Jacobs had a great relationship with him. Loved Scott Drew, but Matt Painter got it done. And congratulations to Matt Painter. But you know what made me, when I heard that, I was like, man, Matt Painter must be the nicest dude ever. That's what I thought. Was like, because if you come down, like, to me, if you come down to two schools and one of them is Baylor, not that I like, this is a little biased because I like him so much with Coach Drew. You know him. I mean, he's just the most genuine, like, friendly person in the world. And like, when you hear that, like, man, guy must be nice. Like, so that's the first thing I thought. Like, he must be really nice.
Must be a hell of a guy.
Like, he must listen, I know Coach Drew's a nice guy, but have you had this chicken parm I just made?
Right.
You'll get homemade meals like this all the time. Like, after practice, he's like, hey, pancake dinner, guys?
And by the way, I may or may not have lost some money on Baylor yesterday, so that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That one, I'll tell you this. I'll talk about Gonzaga and Kansas. Great first half. Excellent first half of the game. Great first half of the game. Then Gonzaga, Mark Few went into the locker room and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to miss any shots.
Yeah.
And then we're going to make it so that they don't make any shots. And then the team's like, I don't know if that's going to work, coach. He's like, I know it will.
That's coaching. That's coaching,
That's what happened. When you don't miss a shot for like 9 straight minutes, it's really hard to lose a game. And at that same time, when you don't make a shot for a good chunk of that, and clearly Kansas is a team that's out of gas. You heard Bill Self after the game saying, look, I've been thinking about next year. If you think about, and this is dedicated solely to my wife right now, who was very devastated after they lost. Mm-hmm. But when you think about, they took 3 scholarship hits from the NCAA this year. They lost 2 of their freshman recruits to the transfer portal before the season even started, made a terrible decision by bringing Arterio Morrison, who didn't start, and then didn't get the best out of Nick Timberlake until the Big 12 and NCAA tournament. They had a gigantic gaping, like they had seats on the bench that weren't like, you had more seats on the charter plane than you ever would have because there's just not guys there, right? Yeah. And that is coming off, and Bill Self would never say this, and it's really none of our business, but I don't think it's coincidental that he had the big health scare last year at the NCAA tournament, and this is the time in the month after the NCAA tournament when the portal's open, when all this, where you need to be super aggressive and you need to be Bill Self at full strength, and he physically was not.
Yeah.
And so they knew they were going to take this NCAA penalty, and he kind of bet that it wouldn't work, but he admitted, like, look, I'm never going to build a roster that way again. We're going to be more accountable for that. And the fact that they were able to come in 5th in the best basketball league in the country, in spite of all that, just shows you how great Bill Self in Kansas is, that they're just like, they can have the worst year ever and still be, one bad half away from the Sweet 16 by accident.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. I mean, Kansas to me, like, has been, with the exception of a couple of years here and there, Kansas in the past growing up, I don't know if you remember, but Kansas was always that team that always disappointed you. Yeah. 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed, they're out in the second round. It almost felt like it was clockwork back in the day for Kansas to do that. But I mean, Bill Self is a Hall of Fame coach. He's I would hire him to run my program 7 days out of the week. No questions asked. No problem.
Yeah. By the way, the last 3 of the last 4 national champions, obviously UConn made it to the second weekend, but the previous 3, Kansas, Baylor, and Virginia, have not made it to the second weekend of the tournament since they won it.
Yeah.
Look, and I don't think that's an indictment. Tony Bennett's a little bit of an indictment on him. His style is too old. He doesn't update it. He's going to update his style. I think he will, and I think he'll be fine. Clearly, he's a smart enough coach to figure out how to win with scoring 12 points a night in 2019 when they did. But it is hard to win it is hard to win, especially, when you become Baylor's previous like big wins in the tournament didn't come when people expected them to win. It's when they were like crafty, like, oh, look at this little team. Like they've got something special going on. When you become the hunted, it's harder, man. When you are everybody's like big game. And look, for Clemson, it was a big deal to play Baylor because their coach went out on a limb and said, hey, I don't think the Big 12 is that great. We've got a better league all up and down, top to bottom, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And you know what? He got his opportunity and he proved it. And Baylor kind of fell into their old patterns of, one, they were banged up. Yves Meeksy wasn't 100%. You had Langston Love out for about 5-minute stretch, or not Langston Love. Langston Love was out. Jalen Bridges was out for about 5 minutes, and they're very lucky he came back in. And then they couldn't come back because they fell in the hole like they did all year long. They played this, what I call it, Garrett, Seabiscuit.
Yes.
They were Seabiscuit. You remember Seabiscuit had to like be behind to understand he was in a race? That's kind of what this Baylor team was. They were Seabiscuit. They had to be behind before they realized that it's a race now. Now I got to go. So that which they didn't realize it from leading top to bottom on Friday. They just and it sucks for Baylor. It sucks for Coach Drew. And people will say like, oh, well, there's another early exit. Well, yeah, man, there's early exits for – look, John Calipari's got a way bigger problem than anybody else, right?
Huge.
And so it's hard. It is hard to win in this tournament.
No doubt about it. I mean, and that's just not recent. Like, we're not talking recency bias. I mean, like, what was it? 25 years ago, I remember Dean Smith, when he was still coaching North Carolina, they lost to Boston College in the second round, when they were a power. So it happens every year. We've seen Duke get upset in the first round. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's an indictment on Scott Drew and the program itself. I think the program is doing better than fine. So yeah, it's you catch a team at the right time. I didn't have Clemson getting out of the first round. So I mean,
no, nor did I.
Yeah, what the hell do I know?
Yeah.
At this point,
no. I'm not hating on Houston. Look. All right, Alan in the chat room said I'm hating on Houston. I had them losing in the title game. I don't think that's hating.
No.
Like, now I think they're probably going to win. Like now, look, they were my second choice. Not hating. I don't think Alan knows what hating is.
Emmanuel Sharp, man, like he was phenomenal yesterday. I mean, nothing against Jamal Shedd, who was also terrific, but Emmanuel Sharp yesterday was terrific.
Four starters fouled out, and you win a game against a team that had nothing to lose, and a team Buzz Williams was not going to get fired this year.
Yeah.
But he was in the discussion of, is he living up to the money they're paying him? And the reason he is A&M just had that discussion and decision about their football coach, who costs way more than Buzz Williams, and Buzz Williams is pricey. And they said, we're going to pay you $75 million to go out the door. So the message was sent to the athletic department of like, hey, you better start winning or you're gone, because apparently it's not a rumor. We do have all the money in the world. We're not worried about it.
Right.
So that was that was going to come up about Buzz, which I think would have been maybe premature. But they proved the way they closed down the stretch, the way they've done it. He just needs to start out better and play better in mid-January and early February, usually where they get tripped up. But A&M played a great game last night. Really, like when they went to overtime, I thought, man, Houston, the way that Houston reacted to that, like if you looked at their fans all were like, oh, well, that's it. This is our moment where we choke it away, especially given the foul situation as it was. But guess what? Kelvin Sampson, one of the great coaches of all time, figured it out.
Yep.
He figured it out, and they won. So anyway, I mean, that's why now, I mean, outside of UConn, like maybe I should have picked Houston, because they've shown that like it doesn't really matter what you throw at them, they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
They're going to figure it out. All the games they play are fairly clear. Like this was the sloppiest game they played all year foul-wise, and sometimes that's not really on you. That's just on the three guys out there with the whistles and what they're going to decide to call and win and how a game goes. But they lost 3 games during the regular season, and not a one of them did they play what you would call poorly. like many
Yeah.
teams who lose do. So,
And I think they're really well set up to get to the Final Four. It's kind of like if you look at that side of the bracket, you kind of get the feeling like if they get past Duke, they're going to get past whoever wins between Marquette and NC State. I mean, if they get past Duke, I think you can pretty much lock in Houston as the Final Four team, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a foregone conclusion. All right, we're going to keep it right here. I want to talk about something, Pierre, that is not on the court basketball related. Kim Mulkey made waves on, was that Saturday, Garrett?
Yes, it was Saturday.
On Saturday,
Yes.
when she held a press conference to preemptively get out in front of whatever column that Kent Babb has coming out about her at the Washington Post. I'm going to state some things that are facts and then get into the opinion. One, the Washington Post took down Richard Nixon. Okay? So a basketball coach, they're not afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Two, the Washington Post is currently owned by Jeff Bezos, who, with his spare money, made a weenie rocket and takes it up to space. He also not bothered by the rantings of a basketball coach. Three, defamation is very difficult to prove in court, especially when newspapers as big as the Washington Post have things in place, and you know this because you're in TV news. Before you take a story to air or to print, Pierre, you cannot just get on, like, how many times have you said, I think I've got something here, but you can't just get on the air and say it. You've got to go through a process of you trust but verify, and you go through and verify. They have a legal team that's going to pour through this. They said the reason she said she only had 2 days to comment was, well, this is going to print. Usually they give you a chance to respond to it, and they send you questions that you can respond to. Like, that is what they're doing so they don't get sued, because you've had the chance to comment on it and deny what's ever in the column. And by her own admission, Kent Babb's been trying to get an interview with her for 2 years. So she didn't just have 2 days. She had 2 years. And so instead of taking that time and sitting down for the interview and stating her case, she waited until the end, hoping it would go away. And it didn't, whatever it was. And she's saying she did this because of a hit piece on Brian Kelly. Fine, whatever. And then she goes and trashes the media. This is why people don't trust the media. Well, I mean, people don't necessarily trust the media because of things that are not Kent Babb's doing. It is also you saying you shouldn't trust this guy because he's going to write something I don't like. And here's the other thing. We have no idea what the column's going to be about.
Right.
None. And it was the textbook case of taking a one-day story and turning it into a 2-day story. She should have just left well enough alone, let it come out, and see what happens after that.
The Washington Post is going to make let's say Kim Mulkey wins in court. The amount of money that the Washington Post is going to be making now with clicks and views of this story will be used to then pay Kim Mulkey if she somehow dramatically wins in court, because she has inadvertently, whether she realizes it or not, I don't know, has flamed this fire to a scorching heat. Because if she didn't even make mention of it, people would just see an article drop and they'll be like, oh, okay, maybe I'll read it or not. But now that she has gone scorched earth on this whole situation, everybody in America is like, well, what's in the article? Well, I got to read what's in the article now. What's she so mad about? And I'm like, Kim, do you not realize what you're doing? I just want to take a quick second because, I was there for 4 years.
Yeah.
In the interest of full disclosure, Kim was one of my favorite people to talk to because of her candor. Her candor was always, I found her to be pretty blunt, pretty honest, and I appreciated that about her. I enjoyed her fieriness. Something about her fiery attitude and nature, resonated with me. I feel like I click with people like that. Yeah. How many times would we be in a press conference, you and I, whether it's practice or whether it's after a game, and she would go out of her way to point to Bryce Cherry or point to Jerry and be like, you should write this, or this should be in the paper. You should put this. You didn't write. I'm like, that's not how it works, Kim.
Yeah.
It's not how it works. What we do is try to report as openly and honestly as possible. There's a lot of different conversations happening at once here. I don't disagree with her that people are distrusting of media. I think there's a very valid point that people should be distrusting of media. I'm in the media. I don't trust the media most of the time, most of myself. I work in the business. I know how it works. So I don't necessarily disagree with her on that. But in this instance, I'm wondering what was said, what was printed that she obviously didn't like, and how. In my mind, I'm thinking how much of this has to do with the Kate Fagan article from 10 years ago.
All of it.
How much? Yeah, and how much? And by extension, the situation with Brittany Griner.
Yeah. This is where she went, and she was never. She didn't talk to a local reporter here because of a headline, and didn't even realize that the reporters don't write the headlines. The editor writes the headline. And so I'll tell you this. This was. She said this at a team dinner that the last one that I went to. But she was at the end of the year dinner, and they had lost to A&M and not gone to the Final Four. They played them 3 times or 4. That was the 4th time they played, twice in the regular season, once in the conference tournament, and then A&M was the 2 seed, and A&M won the national championship that year in women's basketball. She said at the dinner, she said, we had the paper here say that not winning the national championship, and I'm doing my Mulkey right now, was a massive disappointment. What's a massive disappointment? And then whatever seed the men were ranked, she threw the men right under the bus. And I was like, oh, come on. The one has nothing to do with the other, And yes, you had Brittany Griner. When John Wooden had Lou Alcindor, they didn't lose because he had the best player in the country. And that's why it's disappointing is that you have this player that no one can defend and you lost. That's a thing. That's why it's disappointing, but that's also what sports is. That's how sports happen. Sometimes things we don't ever expect to happen. And that's why we watch every night, because we don't know what's going to happen. And so she's always tried to control the narrative, and she can't here. And again, she is taking shots at a reporter, an award-winning journalist with an impeccable record, who is very well respected in the industry. This is not somebody who works for cable news. This is not, and that's why I think mostly why we don't trust the media, because cable news exists. And that's why we don't trust it, because that's, when you can get on and kite for one side or the other, then you're not really doing journalistic work. You're just yelling out what you think. But Kent Babb has a spotless record of journalism. So she's trying to discredit him because most people haven't heard of Kent Babb, because he's just a reporter, and that's the point. He doesn't want you to have heard of him. He wants you to have read it and do that. And many people I respect in the business, I contacted about him this weekend, because I know who he was, and they were like, this guy is as good a reporter as there is in the country, as good as a newspaper guy as there is. Old school newspaper guy. That's not good for Mulkey if she's already out there saying this guy's a sleazy reporter when this dude knows what he's doing. And again, I repeat, the Washington Post took down Nixon. A basketball coach of any regard is not really the toughest thing they've had to take on. They printed the Pentagon Papers, for God's sakes.
I have no problem. I have no problem with somebody trying to defend their name, defend their reputation, I have no problem with that. My problem with Kim is she constantly has a chip on her shoulder. She constantly makes it seem like people are out to get her. I think that might be true in a couple of instances. I think listen, whether people realize it or not, I'm going to tell everybody the truth right now. Whether people realize it or not, and I'm not going to get too far down the road of this, but whether people realize it or not, there are a lot more people working in journalism, whether it's newspapers or television or radio, that lean more left politically than right. That is just a statement of fact. There is a lot more that lean left than right. So I can understand why she probably feels like there's a little bit of a witch hunt here. And stemming back to the situation with Brittany Griner from 10 years ago, I think that people are still out for blood for her on that regard, given the political, given the cultural situations that we're in life as a country. So I don't have a problem with her wanting to defend herself when it comes to those things, and there's context to everything. But she always has been somebody who feels like I've felt a constant chip on her shoulder, feels like people are out to get her, not getting the respect that she deserves when she was the queen of the town, in Wake for over 20 years. She goes to LSU in 2 years, wins the national title. Nobody's trying to discredit Kim Mulkey as a basketball coach. Yeah. Nobody. How could you? You would have no credibility if you tried. None. But so I'm very eager to read what's going to be coming out of the Washington Post so I can get more context and then probably have a little bit more of a further opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I think Kim forgets what happened with Tipper Gore back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I can just tell you, as a 12, 13-year-old kid that lived in Fort Myers, Florida, I had probably never heard of Public Enemy. I had never heard of them. I mean, when I'd maybe watched them on MTV, but even then on MTV, because Public Enemy and NWA, they were so groundbreaking and controversial at the time. Even MTV kind of had to skate down the road a little bit more than they would have. But the minute I heard that there's something so bad on this that I need to put a label on it, I gotta hear that song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You have an idea, Columbia. I had the Columbia House scam going with my parents. Where you got do you remember Columbia House?
I vaguely remember it.
Garrett, do you remember Columbia House?
Put the order in and kept getting the free ones and stuff?
Yeah. Where you could get 10 CDs for a penny or whatever, 12 CDs, 15. It kept going up. And then they would just charge you every month for the cost of one CD. So basically you have $15. I had an allowance. Yeah, I can pay, I'll do this. They're fine with that. They just deducted it from the total. But what I did on the first one is I snuck in Dennis Leary, No Cure for Cancer, an excellent comedy album by one of the great dirty comics of the world. And I snuck that in there, and I listened to that. Yeah. And I would always when you get to, and then you cancel, and then you do it again, and then Columbia House will never find us, right, Garrett? When I went into college and I had 4 different addresses, you're not gonna find me. You're not gonna find us. Well, that right. I got a ton of CDs out of them, but when I was still having to get them through Columbia House before I could drive and hide them from my parents, man, I went and oh, yeah, look at that, Brooks and Dunn. Oh, what do you know? Oh, Chuck D. Here we go. That's how. Oh, Snoop Dogg. How did that get in here? And one time I got caught. I was that's not what I put down. Yeah. That's not what I put down. I'm going to go throw this away.
Yeah.
How dare you, Columbia House, for giving me Dr. Dre? That's not my taste in music at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I wish we had more time to talk about it too. But Kim, her ego gets in the way, and I think her ego is getting in the way here again. And it's, like I said, I had a lot of fun covering Kim because I appreciate her candor, and I don't get that from a lot of people I interview, and that's what I appreciate. And
well, after that Kate Fagan thing, the candor kind of went away.
She said to me, Kim and I were face to face after the Kate Fagan report came out after a practice, and Kim said to me, she looked me dead in the eye about Kate, and she's like, "Oh, she just had an agenda. She just had an agenda." And I don't really know what you want me to say to that. I don't know for a fact whether she did or not. All I know is what I'm reading, and I don't know anything beyond that. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I think Kate Fagan was even on the record saying that Kim tried to get her fired after the fact.
Yeah. Oh no, she did.
So it's she gets in her own way, and that bothers me about her because I think she's such a great, interesting character in the world of sports, and her own ego gets in the way.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Pierre, we'll see you next week. Enjoy the opposite of Mexico.
Quite the opposite. If you can see what I'm seeing right now, good God.
Yeah, I would not be able to sleep tonight. That's for sure. This is the Triple Option. We've got a loaded show. We were talking about West Virginia's new coach. We'll recap the weekend. Tons of great guests. This is the Triple Option on 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple